Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and today we're going to be talking about Nintendo Switch OLED model. This was just announced today. It is coming out on October 8th, the same day as Metroid Dread, and the trailer for it shows off footage for Breath of the Wild 2, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and also Metroid Dread. It opens up with Metroid Dread, and there's a lot going on here, there's a lot of details going on, but the question that people have been sort of discussing and debating: is this the Nintendo Switch Pro that's been so long rumored? Is this the system we've been waiting for? I think the answer is yes and no at the same time. So we're going to be talking about that today, trying to piece together all the information we currently have. This is a developing story, so I'm sure that there will be more discussions going beyond what we've learned today. But yes, today we're focusing on the Switch OLED model, what it is, what it means for Nintendo's games, their lineup, and whether this is the Switch Pro or not. Now, before we jump into things, let me very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on the screen. You can check that all out, it's linked in the description below, and of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe. So before we jump into the details of the trailer and what this all may mean, let's first talk about the actual details that Nintendo is telling us about this system. So the Switch OLED model is coming out on October 8th, and there are two different color sets. There's the white set and the neon red, neon blue set. So I want to talk a little bit about this white set here. One, white is sexy, it looks cool, it looks sleek, I want it a lot. I may get this system, I'm not sure yet, but what's really sort of fascinating about this to me is that, again, the system's coming out on October 8th. The trailer opens up talking about Metroid Dread. There are other tweets alluding to Metroid Dread and the Switch model as well. And if you look at the colors, it kind of reminds me of Emmy, actually. Emmy is this creature that is mostly plated with white, and there's some black internals, very similar to how this white set Switch OLED model looks. I think there's some intention here. They are launching alongside of each other. Perhaps there's something like this. Nintendo even put out a tweet showcasing and advertising that yes, these are the two different box sets. It's coming out on October 8th, the same day as Metroid Dread. That's what Nintendo's pushing, that's what Nintendo is talking about right now. Metroid Dread is looking to be that game that is meant to push this Switch system. But let's move on to the other details they talk about. So they talk about how this OLED model has a vibrant 7-inch OLED screen with a slimmer bezel. The large screen's vivid colors have a high contrast and deliver a rich handheld tabletop gaming experience. So it's really looking like the focus for this system is to improve the tabletop and handheld experiences. When you play in handheld mode, the games are going to look better on this better screen. Those colors are going to stand out more, it's going to be richer, it's going to look better, and Metroid Dread is going to look amazing on this system. And they even then go on to talk about this new sort of kickstand for the Switch. It's a much wider one, it has multiple sort of angles you can set it to, and this is a dramatic improvement over that little flimsy little thing that we had for the base Switch, and this is going to make tabletop mode feel a lot more legitimate with the bigger size screen, with this better flap that's a lot more sturdy, and with the just improved visuals of the screen and such, and a few other things they mentioned. It's all looking like this is meant to improve that portable and tabletop mode experiences. They also make mention of the dock here, and they say that it has a LAN port, which is really good because you can plug in an Ethernet port there, and now the Switch can probably run far greater internet speeds. On the base Switch, there is a bit of a bottleneck. Even if you use a wired adapter, you can only get to like around 30-35 down speeds. With an actual Ethernet port connection, theoretically you could get far more, hundreds of down speed on there, and it could be a tremendous improvement in terms of downloading things, but also with having that connection already into the box from the get-go, it's a lot easier for people to set that up, have a stable connection. So ultimately what this is all going to mean is that on this Switch you'll be able to download things a lot faster, and this is another step in the right direction for Nintendo having a more stable sort of online connection across their different multiplayer games. This system's also going to have 64 gigabytes of internal storage. You can still put in micro SD cards. To me, this is not a big deal because I use a big micro SD card anyway, but it's a bit more storage there internally, so for those who don't have a micro SD card, I guess it will help a little bit. They also go ahead and talk about how this has enhanced audio, which kind of supports the notion of this being a more sort of premier handheld or tabletop mode experience. I guess that's nice. I look forward to hearing the difference, but sure, it's not bad. They also make sure to note that this system is compatible with all Nintendo Switch games, as well as their existing Joy-Con controllers, and I believe Nintendo's simply saying this so people are very clear on what this is. This is a system in the Switch family. It is like a Switch Lite. It is like a base Switch. This is not a next generation system. It doesn't look like there will be any exclusive games. None have been announced at this point, so that's pretty much what this is. Now, what's going on here? Is this the system we've been waiting for? Is this the big system? Well, I'll tell you that pretty much every feature here, or spec, is everything we've talked about, predicted, speculated, and expected for some time. But for one big glaring detail, there's one thing that's wrong here that is a big sort of distinction, and that is the lack of any sort of 4K sort of upscaling technologies here that are being marketed. Now, maybe this system is sort of set up to where if it's played on a 4K screen, it's somewhat optimized for games look and run a little bit better there than a normal Switch, but that's just pure speculation, and if it is there, I don't think it'd be anything sort of significant because they're not marketing it at all. It's not really made any mention of in their specs on the Nintendo official website, so it's just not that. And what Bloomberg and Eurogamer sort of reported was that it would have 4K functionality here, and that isn't here. And that's super interesting. Now, before E3, I had put out a prediction that we would see Breath of the Wild 2 and a Switch Pro come out October of this year, launching alongside of each other, and that the Switch Pro be sort of a 4K kind of system, and that Breath of the Wild 2 be used to sort of showcase that. That prediction was clearly wrong. Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out in 2022. This system is not a 4K system, but it is coming out in October. It is an enhanced Switch, and there is a big Nintendo game that is being used as a launch title. But it's not Zelda this time around. It's Metroid Dread, as we mentioned earlier. So that's what they're pushing right now, and I think it's fitting for what it is. But what's peculiar is that when you take a look at the trailer, when they show it off and announce it and all, yeah, they open up with Metroid Dread, and that's exciting. But then shortly afterwards, they show off Breath of the Wild 2. A couple different shots that are just from that trailer. Why is this game part of the marketing here? So is it possible that at one point maybe there was some sort of plan that there would be a Breath of the Wild 2 release this year? Potentially. COVID may have moved that up to 2022, but I'm not even expecting Breath of the Wild 2 for March, although, maybe this trailer is hinting towards it coming up at the end of the fiscal year. It's not out of the question, but I'm personally not expecting it right now. So just some things to sort of consider here. Maybe at one point Nintendo had a certain plan and then they sort of pivoted and things changed a little bit. It would kind of make sense because when you take a look at the reports from Bloomberg and Eurogamer and others, the report was that this would be a 4K capable system. And that's not what this is. Was there confusion in the messaging or the information? Potentially. It's also possible that maybe at one point Nintendo was planning something like this and they pushed it up because they didn't quite have the kind of lineup that would be supportive of that. That's also a possibility here. But the point still stands that this isn't a 4K system. So is this a Switch Pro that we've been hearing about for so long? Well, based off the Eurogamer and Bloomberg reports that we got shortly before E3, I think it is. In the sense that this is a system that they were sort of alluding to would be coming out this year, but at the same time, it's not exactly what they expected it would be, right? So it's kind of like, yes, it is, but also, no, it isn't. So I guess the more important question to ask is, will there be another follow-up system that will have 4K capabilities and it'll be coming out later? Maybe next year alongside Breath of the Wild 2. I think that's entirely possible. I'm not saying I expect it, but I do think there's maybe that possibility there. But if I gotta be frank with you, I feel like what makes the most sense is that if there is another revision, it's not coming out for another 2 years. Base Nintendo Switch came out March 2017. Switch Lite, 2.5 years later, September of 2019, we got that system. Then 25 months later, or less than that, somewhere between 24 and 25 months, basically about 2 years, we get the Switch OLED model. So simply based off that pattern, I feel like it would make most sense to sort of expect another model maybe about 2 years from now, 2 to 2.5 years. And if there is another model, maybe it wouldn't even be like a 4K Switch. Maybe it'd be more like a cheaper, even simpler Switch than what the Switch Lite is. Although, me thinking about it, maybe the Switch Lite is already that, and that's pretty much it. So maybe more likely 2 to 3 years from now, we will get another Switch model. I don't expect another one next year. It could happen, but just simply based off the historical pattern, which isn't a long one, so maybe, it just doesn't seem likely to me in my opinion, especially because if you're continually putting up these different revisions, you can't put out too many too often because you're gonna start to burn your fan base. They're gonna get a little upset about that because then they'll be upset, well, I just bought this version, why would you release another version? And this version is a more expensive version, by the way. This is a $350 system. So if Nintendo comes out with a 4K capable Switch next year that is like $400 or $450, is that gonna really make sense? I don't think so. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that we're not getting a 4K Switch next year. That could change, but that's what I'm sort of thinking right now. I feel like at this point, this far into the game, what makes the most sense is that there will be a new system 2 to 3 years from now. But at that point, maybe it's the next generation system. So instead of waiting 2 to 2.5 years, maybe wait a full 3 years. So right now we're in 2021, so maybe by holiday 2024, we see the next generation for Nintendo. And maybe it's just called Switch 2. And that will be simple, and it will work, and it will be just fine. That's it. That's what I'm sort of thinking right now. I feel like we're too late into the game, because March 2022 will be 5 years into the system's life cycle. Let's say they were to release a Switch Pro in 2023 that has 4K capabilities. How much longer are they going to wait until they bring out a next generation Switch? 2025? And still be relying on that base Switch, which came out March 2017? That seems like maybe a little bit too much of a stretch. So I'm going to say 2 to 3 years from now, we just move on to next generation Switch, but we have 2 to 3 years to enjoy the rest of the Switch's current lifespan. If you look at 2022, it's looking to be like a really, really big year with Breath of the Wild 2 and other big games. So that's seeming like what they're going to be trying to sort of push right now. So maybe those reports were just getting part of the real information. Perhaps plans changed because they change all the time, and maybe Nintendo was considering it at one point, but they decided to just hold it off and just focus on this instead, and that way they wouldn't alienate fans, and they'll be ready for the next generation 2 to 3 years from now. That's what I'm sort of thinking, but what are you guys thinking? Is this a Switch Pro? Yes? No? A little bit of both? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.